So, hello. Welcome to our study of the Life Divine this evening. Chapter 23, we begin. Man and the Evolution. So that means that we're in the last 6 chapters of the Life Divine. The 6 which the mother chose to investigate with the students in the playground of the ashram, starting in October of 1957, 60 years ago. In fact, on the 16th of October, and it is the 16th of October in India right now, the topic of discussion was involution and evolution. The very next week, on the 23rd of October, she began her study with the children of the Life Divine, last 6 chapters, beginning with this, Man and the Evolution. Now, some context here, and if you will permit a quick aside, I think the music that we just listened to was from the 19th of October, 1963. I thought we would cram as many correspondences as we possibly could into one evening. So this chapter is freshly titled, but there is a chapter very like it, at least in name, in the Arya, which appeared on the 15th of August in 1917, 100 years ago. The chapter then was called Man and the Evolutionary Movement. Now the titles and some of the subject matter overlap, but most of what we see in this chapter, virtually all of it, is new. Sri Aurobindo began writing this as he was recovering following his accident. I think the first volume of the new Life Divine had appeared in 1939. This and all that followed it was seen for the first time around July 1940. All these new chapters were written by hand on loose bond paper, one after the other, one after the other. Now again, we start with the mottos. Since this is a new chapter, all these mottos taken from Vedantic sources are freshly chosen. There are 4 from Upanishads, and there is 1 from the first mandala of the Rig Veda. Let's go through these. Chapter 23, Man and the Evolution. The one Godhead, secret in all beings. Eko Devaha, Sarva Bhuteshu Guddha. All pervading, the inner self of all, Antaratman. Presiding over all action, witness, Sakshi. Conscious knower, Cheta, and absolute, Kevala. The one in control, Eka Vashi, over the many who are passive, Nishkriyanam, to nature, fashions one seed, Ekam Bijam, in many ways, Bahuddha Yaha Karoti. This is from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, the Upanishad of the white-horsed one. This is an element of the Taittiriya school in the Yajur Veda. So we see here substance that we will meet again and again through this chapter. A Godhead which dwells unseen in all things which are in this universe. It is an all-pervading Godhead. It is the inner subjective being of all who are conscient. It is, in fact, a conscious Godhead who directs the affairs of the many. They seem to be passive, that is, subject to nature, but this Godhead works a secret will, though unseen, through all these beings, bringing all of them out of a common seed. There's one reality, and this nature, this seed, is an extension of its own being. The second one is also from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. The Godhead moves in this field, Asmin Kshetra, modifying each web of things separately in many ways. One, he presides over all wombs, Yoni Swabhavam, and natures. Himself, the womb of all, Vishva Yonihi. He is that which brings to ripeness the nature of the being, and he gives to all who have to be matured their result of development, and appoints all qualities to their workings. So secretly again, a Godhead directing all things to grow and leading them to the fruit of their work. The third is from the Katha Upanishad, the Upanishad of the story. He fashions one form of things in many ways, ekam rupam bahudha karoti, except for the variance of a word, the same citation in the Katha as is in the Shvetashvatara. One form fashioned by this divine conscious being in many ways. A common nature, a multiplicity based on that one nature. And then the citation from the Rig Veda, and this is a hymn dedicated to Agni, the god of the mystic fire, who has perceived Chiketa, this truth occult, Ninyam, that the child, Vatsaha, gives being to the mothers by the workings of his nature. Who has seen this? An offspring from the lap of many waters, he comes forth from them a seer, Kavi, possessed of his whole law of nature. Manifested, he grows in the lap of their crookednesses and becomes high, beautiful, and glorious, Joshayete. So, however dark the beginning seems, there is a wonderful close at the end of the piece. And then, of course, we've just chanted this verse, haven't we? From the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, the Upanishad of the great forest. From the non-being to true being, from the darkness to the light, from death to immortality. So these Sri Aurobindo draws from throughout the whole of this essay. You'll see it every couple of minutes. Let's begin. A spiritual evolution, an evolution of consciousness in matter in a constant developing self-formation till the form can reveal the indwelling spirit, is then the keynote, the central significant motive of the terrestrial existence. Here is the purpose of a cosmos, the evolution of an individual, microcosmic, in the larger expression of the divine, macrocosmic, but a developing consciousness that evolves over time. This significance is concealed at the outset by the involution of the spirit, the divine reality, in a dense material inconscience. A veil of inconscience, a veil of insensibility of matter, hides the universal consciousness force which works within it, so that the energy, which is the first form the force of creation assumes in the physical universe, appears to be itself inconscient, and yet does the works of a vast occult intelligence. So an involution, this process by which the divine compresses itself from its infinity, from its effulgent light, from its experience of unwalled bliss, into what is its opposite, what is dark, what is insentient, what is divided. What he is saying is that this Sat, Chit, this reality, this consciousness, are hidden, as we have just seen in the citations from the Vedanta. It is not obvious. Two, the Shakti, he says here, manifests at all levels, but is manifest too, and first in the physical. And it is this that orders the physical universe. It is a vast occult intelligence. It is operating even in what seems to be insentient. The obscure, mysterious creatrix ends indeed by delivering the secret consciousness out of its thick and tenebrous prison. But she delivers it slowly, little by little, in minute infinitesimal drops, in thin jets, in small vibrant concretions of energy and substance, of life, of mind, as if that were all she could get out through the crass obstacle, the dull, reluctant medium of an inconscient stuff of existence. So, the obscure, mysterious creatrix, a hint back to the idea that it is a Shakti, a Mahashakti, the Divine Mother, who is affecting all of this. Drop by drop, infinitesimal, a word that means infinitely small. This consciousness breaking out of an apparent prison, a tenebrous prison. Tenebrous means dark. It's from the Latin tenebrae, meaning darkness. At first, he says, she houses herself in forms of matter which appear to be altogether unconscious, then struggles towards mentality in the guise of living matter, and attains to it imperfectly in the conscious animal. This consciousness is at first rudimentary, mostly a half-subconscious or just conscious instinct. It develops slowly till in more organized forms of living matter, it reaches its climax of intelligence and exceeds itself in man, the thinking animal, who develops into the reasoning mental being, but carries along with him, even at his highest elevation, the mold of original animality, the dead weight of subconscience of body, the downward pull of gravitation towards the original inertia and nescience, the control of an inconscient material nature over his conscious evolution, its power for limitation, its law of difficult development, its immense force for retardation and frustration. So we seem to be leaping along, bringing life out of matter and then mind into living matter. But always we're carrying the atavisms, we're carrying the weight of the precursive cosmic being with us. And that frustrates rapid growth because we're always fighting against it. It's pulling us back. And if we relax, it does indeed draw us downwards. This control by the original inconscience over the consciousness emerging from it takes the general shape of a mentality struggling towards knowledge, but itself in what seems to be its fundamental nature, and ignorance. Thus hampered and burdened, mental man has still to evolve out of himself the fully conscious being, a divine manhood or a spiritual and supramental supermanhood, which shall be the next product of the evolution. That transition will mark the passage from the evolution in the ignorance to a greater evolution in the knowledge, founded and proceeding in the light of the superconscient and no longer in the darkness of the ignorance and inconscience. So, subtly placed in that argument is the fact that the pioneers, and that includes anyone who aspires to this greater future, must reveal, must reach that consciousness in themselves to provide a bridge for humanity to effect this transition. Because if they fail, then those two worlds remain apart. The supra-conscient above and the conscient stretching down into the inconscient here below. The triple world cannot be transformed unless we make that change. So we can't expect it to come from all the life around us. We have to do it. Sri Aurobindo's expectation was that the yogic force of sadhaks combined into a tessellated whole would be able to forge a path, to cross a bridge into that greater consciousness and bring it here. This terrestrial evolutionary working of nature from matter to mind and beyond it has a double process. There is an outward, visible process of physical evolution with birth as its machinery. For each evolved form of body, housing its own evolved power of consciousness, is maintained and kept in continuity by heredity. There is, at the same time, an invisible process of soul evolution with rebirth into ascending grades of form and consciousness as its machinery. So there's a physical evolution, and its key component is heredity, and there's a soul evolution which uses rebirth as a method of growth and ascension. The first, by itself, would mean only a cosmic evolution, for the individual would be a quickly perishing instrument, and the race, a more abiding collective formulation, would be the real step in the progressive manifestation of the cosmic inhabitant, the universal spirit. Rebirth is an indispensable condition for any long duration and evolution of the individual being in the earth existence. Each grade of cosmic manifestation, each type of form that can house the indwelling spirit, is turned by rebirth into a means for the individual soul, the psychic entity, to manifest more and more of its concealed consciousness. Each life becomes a step in a victory over matter by a greater progression of consciousness in it, which shall make eventually matter itself a means for the full manifestation of the Spirit. Now, this may seem to be an aside, but in terms of philosophies that look at evolution of consciousness, this idea of the evolution really occurring only at the cosmic level, and the individuals are in a sense dispensable, or when they perish they go to a well-deserved heaven, or we're sad to say, other places. But there is no individual evolution that's part of it. This is a view that many feel that was Teilhard de Chardin's real view. Teilhard de Chardin may have been inspired by Sri Aurobindo's early essays on evolutionary consciousness, especially because he was reading perhaps the French translations that Mother had made of the first year's issues of Arya, and got the leading ideas from that, which later found their articulation in his unpublished works. You know, the Catholic Church suppressed his work, wouldn't let it come into public reading until after his death. And then the books came out, The Phenomenon of Man, etc. So in his view, we begin from the inorganic and then move into the biosphere, the world of life. And from there, we develop mentality, the noosphere. And then we go beyond mentality and reach an omega point, which is hyper-personal, where God manifests in history. But there's no breath about the individual being part of that cosmic machinery that draws that into reality. This is really the will of the divine that's being done, and the individual effort is indispensable. Sri Aurobindo's conclusion is that this is an alternative view, but it is not his view. Let's continue. But this account of the process and meaning of the terrestrial creation is at every point exposed to challenge in the mind of man himself, because the evolution is still halfway on its journey, is still in the ignorance, is still seeking in the mind of a half-evolved humanity for its own purpose and significance. So, we doubt whether this has real force as a true argument. We can't be sure because we're still stuck, we're still mired in the ignorance, only halfway evolved out of it. So it's a grand idea, but are we really convinced? Now, I'm sorry to say, for the rest of the evening, we look at challenges to this grander view of Sri Aurobindo, that there is a purpose of evolution of consciousness and the individual is key to the cosmic advance. Deep breath. It is possible to challenge the theory of evolution on the ground that it is insufficiently founded and that it is superfluous as an explanation of the process of terrestrial existence. It is open to doubt, even if evolution is granted, whether man has the capacity to develop into a higher evolutionary being. It is open also to doubt whether the evolution is likely to go any farther than it has gone already, or whether a supramental evolution, the appearance of a consummated truth consciousness, a being of knowledge, is at all probable in the fundamental ignorance of the earthly nature. So, three things. Do we have the capacity? Has evolution, if it exists, already reached its culmination? And even if there is a supramental consciousness, is it possible for such a perfect awareness to manifest in our imperfect nature? Another construction, neither teleological nor evolutionary, can be put on the workings of the Spirit and the manifestation here. And it may be as well, before proceeding farther, to formulate succinctly the line of thinking which makes such a construction possible. So now he'll unroll this perspective, which is not his, and then I'm afraid to say that in later paragraphs he'll give it a lethal blow. Admitting that the creation is a manifestation of the timeless eternal in a time-eternity. Admitting that there are the 7 grades of consciousness, and that the material inconscience has been laid down as a basis for the reascent of the Spirit. Admitting that rebirth is a fact, a part of the terrestrial order, still a spiritual evolution of the individual being is not an inevitable consequence of any of these admissions or even of all of them together. In other words, you could take a typical Vedantic view, and even more, a typical theistic Vedantic view, and say that yes, there are these 7 planes of consciousness. Above would be Satchit Ananda. A linking world would be the supramental, Vijnana. And then in the lower range, you would have Manas, mind, Prana, life, and Matter, Anam. These would be the 7th, all of them in a sense condensed into the involved inconscient. And if there is a manifestation, and if there is rebirth, it need not be that it's because of an evolution. The typical view of Vedanta is not that there is an evolving consciousness. This is a new insight championed by Sri Aurobindo, in which he is bringing several worldviews together at one and the same time in this one grand philosophy. So in a way, he exceeds the formulations of the past views of Indian spirituality. He carries them farther to what should be their natural completion, if I can play on words. So, it is possible to take another view of the spiritual significance and the inner process of terrestrial existence. If each thing created is a form of the manifest divine existence, each is divine in itself by the spiritual presence within it, whatever its appearance, its figure, or character in nature. Remember, Sri Aurobindo uses words with purpose. He chooses them carefully. Manifest means to make visible, to make plain, from the Latin manifestus, to strike with the hand. You can reach out and touch it. So it brings what is latent, what is invisible, into visible formation. That is what all things are here. According to this sentence, it is making the divine existence manifest. And if these forms are already divine, there it is. Why would you argue further? In each form of manifestation, he writes, the divine takes the delight of existence, and there is no need of change or progress within it. It's already divine. Why does it have to go from A to B? Where does it have to move to? It's already perfect innately. Whatever ordered display or hierarchy of actualized possibilities is necessitated by the nature of the infinite being is sufficiently provided for by the numberless variation, the teeming multitude of forms, types of consciousness, natures that we see everywhere around us. There is no teleological purpose in creation, and there cannot be, for all is there in the infinite. The divine has nothing that he needs to gain or that he has not. If there is creation and manifestation, it is for the delight of creation, of manifestation, not for any purpose. There is then no reason for an evolutionary movement with a culmination to be reached, or an aim to be worked out and effectuated, or a drive towards ultimate perfection. So, in this way, the picture of the cosmos that we have is a static worldview. There may be this layered series of planes from matter all the way up to the superconscient regions, but they're just there. They're a staircase. It is not something through which we evolve. And this is a static worldview, as we'll see, which has a certain resonance with particular religious views, but we'll come to that. He continues his argument. In fact, we see that the principles of creation are permanent and unchanging. Each type of being remains itself and does not try nor has any need to become other than itself. Granting that some types of existence disappear and others come into being, it is because the consciousness force in the universe withdraws its life delight from those that perish and turns to create others for its pleasure. But each type of life, while it lasts, has its own pattern and remains faithful with whatever minor variations to that pattern. It is bound to its own consciousness and cannot get away from it into other consciousness. Limited by its own nature, it cannot transgress these boundaries and pass into other nature. So, a cat will always be a cat. A mouse will always be a mouse. A human will always be a human. You cannot break out of the pattern set. You can disappear, and that's because the life delight has been withdrawn, and something else will step in and take the space that you formerly occupied. He continues, if the consciousness force of the infinite has manifested life after manifesting matter, and mind after manifesting life, it does not follow that it will proceed to manifest supermind as the next terrestrial creation. For mind and supermind belong to quite different hemispheres. Mind to the lower status of the ignorance, supermind to the higher status of the divine knowledge. This world is a world of the ignorance, and intended to be that only. There need be no intention to bring down the powers of the higher hemisphere into the lower half of existence, or to manifest their concealed presence there. For if they are at all existent here, it is in an occult, incommunicable immanence, and only to maintain the creation, not to perfect it. See, there's that hidden divine that we met in the first citations from the Vedanta. Man is the summit of this ignorant creation. He has reached the utmost consciousness and knowledge of which it is capable. If he tries to go farther, he will only revolve in larger cycles of his own mentality. For that is the curve of his existence here, a finite circling which carries the mind in its revolutions and returns always to the point from which it started. Mind cannot go outside its own cycle. All idea of a straight line of movement or of progress reaching infinitely upward or sidewise into the infinite is a delusion. If the soul of man is to go beyond humanity, to reach either a supramental or a still higher status, it must pass out of this cosmic existence, either to a plane or world of bliss and knowledge, or into the unmanifest, eternal, and infinite. So, you may exit the world and gain some kind of perfection. This is the transcendence accepted as being possible by schools of theism and also by schools which seek an impersonal divinity, or conscious existence, or conscious non-existence, depending on whether you're speaking about Advaita Vedanta or Buddhism. It is true that science now affirms an evolutionary terrestrial existence. But if the facts with which science deals are reliable, the generalizations it hazards are short-lived. It holds them for some decades or some centuries, then passes to another generalization, another theory of things. This happens even in physical science, where the facts are solidly ascertainable and verifiable by experiment. In psychology, which is relevant here, for the evolution of consciousness comes into the picture, its instability is still greater. It passes from one theory to another before the first is well founded. Indeed, several conflicting theories hold the field together. No firm metaphysical building can be erected upon these shifting quicksands. So, if spiritual inquiry, if conscious inquiry through the traditional paths of yoga and of religion can't give the mind an unequivocal yes or no, then scientific theories also fail us, because one is replaced by the other almost as rapidly as it's formulated. And we can't reach the metaphysical underpinnings of what these physical theories would propose. So he continues, heredity, upon which science builds its concept of life evolution, is certainly a power, a machinery for keeping type or species in unchanged being. The demonstration that it is also an instrument for persistent and progressive variation is very questionable. Its tendency is conservative rather than evolutionary. It seems to accept with difficulty the new character that the life force attempts to force upon it. And I think it's well to remember the historical context here. Sri Aurobindo is writing 1939, 1940. We haven't even discovered DNA at this point. We know some of the laws of heredity and things get passed along. So he's describing here a law of constant transmission. And let's just recall the state of biology and anthropology, so far as that goes, as he's writing this. All the facts show that a type can vary within its own specification of nature, but there is nothing to show that it can go beyond it. It has not yet been really established that ape kind developed into man, for it would rather seem that a type resembling the ape, but always characteristic of itself and not of apehood, developed within its own tendencies of nature and became what we know as man, the present human being. It is not even established that inferior races of man developed out of themselves the superior races. Those of an inferior organization and capacity perished. But it has not been shown that they left behind the human races of today as their descendants. But still, such a development within the type is imaginable. The progress of nature from matter to life, from life to mind, may be conceded, but there is no proof yet that matter developed into life or life energy into mind energy. All that can be conceded is that life has manifested in matter, mind in living matter. For there is no sufficient proof that any vegetable species developed into an animal existence, or that any organization of inanimate matter developed into a living organism. Even if it be discovered hereafter that under certain chemical or other conditions life makes its appearance, all that will be established by this coincidence is that in certain physical circumstances life manifests, not that certain chemical conditions are constituents of life, are its elements, or are the evolutionary cause of a transformation of inanimate into animate matter. Here as elsewhere, each grade of being exists in itself and by itself, is manifested according to its own character by its own proper energy, and the gradations above or below it are not origins and resultant sequences, but only degrees in the continuous scale of earth nature. We're pausing here, and let's point out again, this is not Sri Aurobindo's argument. He's undertaken this proposition, this challenge to an evolutionary view of the world, and we're only part of the way through it. We'll finish this argument next week. We'll spend about a month on this chapter, about 4 sessions. And it is the last of the, quote, short chapters. This one's only about 24, 25 pages long. Larger chapters await you in the future. But this is a grand quest. Now we've come to the best part of the life divine, especially the last 4 chapters. So, I looked for something that would be relevant to what we're doing with this chapter. And I found a section in Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, in Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge, that might serve us this evening. So we'll read this. As the height draws the low ever to climb, as the breadths draw the small to adventure vast, their aloofness drives man to suppress himself. Our passion heaves to wed the Eternal's calm, our dwarf-searched mind to meet the Omniscient's light, our helpless hearts to enshrine the Omnipotent's force. Acquiescing in the wisdom that made hell, and the harsh utility of death and tears, acquiescing in the gradual steps of time, careless they seem of the grief that stings the world's heart, careless of the pain that rends its body and life. Above joy and sorrow is that grandeur's walk. They have no portion in the good that dies. Mute, pure, they share not in the evil done. Else might their strength be marred and could not save. Alive to the truth that dwells in God's extremes, awake to a motion of all-seeing force, the slow outcome of the long ambiguous years, and the unexpected good from woeful deeds, the immortal sees not as we vainly see. He looks on hidden aspects and screen powers. He knows the law and natural line of things. Undriven by a brief life's will to act, unharassed by the spur of pity and fear, he makes no haste to untie the cosmic knot, or the world's torn, jarring heart to reconcile. In time he waits for the Eternal's hour. Yet a spiritual secret aid is there. While a tardy evolution's coils wind on, and nature hews her way through adamant, a divine intervention thrones above. Alive in a dead rotating universe, we whirl not here upon a casual globe, abandoned to a task beyond our force. Even through the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall, an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. It is near us in unnumbered bodies and births. In its unslackening grasp, it keeps for us safe the one inevitable supreme result no will can take away and no doom change, the crown of conscious immortality, the Godhead promised to our struggling souls when first man's heart dared death and suffered life. So, namaste, Jai Ma.